Okay, so today we're doing tensile testing on a piece of candy. And this piece of candy happens to be part of a Twizzler. It was like this, and I took this Twizzler apart so that I can just use a part of it. So what I'm going to do tensile testing is I'm going to hold it on each end here, and I'm going to stretch it. I'm going to pull it apart, just like you saw in the tensile testing videos. I'm going to pull it apart with equal force on both sides. And I'm going to notice certain things while I'm pulling it apart. While I'm pulling it, I'll notice that it has first elastic deformation, which is the first thing on the graph. And the first thing on the graph tells me that if I let it go, it'll go back. It's not stretched out, it'll go back to where it was. So if I pull it about like that, it'll go back to where it was before. And once I pull it too far, then it gets into plastic deformation, which means it's gone past this yield point, then it won't go back to its original shape. It's too far stretched out. Now it's in plastic deformation, probably about there. You can kind of get a sense of what it's like. Feels like it's not going to go back to its original form, and there. See, it didn't go back to its original form. And then last, of course, but not least, we want to bring it all the way to the failure point. So we're going to go past the elastic deformation, past the plastic deformation, all the way to the failure point, and we'll start to see it get really thin in a certain spot. I don't see it just yet, but I know it's happening. You can kind of see it happening there in the middle now. It's getting really thin, forming that neck, and there it goes. And it broke. All right, tensile test number 2 with the whole Twizzler. Much bigger, and we're going to pull this apart just like we did the little piece. And I'm going to start pulling it very, very slowly with equal force on both sides. I can feel already that it's in the elastic deformation section, and then it's getting closer and closer to the yield point, which means it's not going to go back to its original shape. So now we're probably in plastic deformation. So if I let go, it won't go, it might go back to its original shape. Maybe I didn't quite get it to the yield point, but I'm getting it closer and closer and closer to the yield point. Now I can feel it at the yield point because I have a little bit less force pulling back on it, and it feels like it's not going to go back to its original shape. It'll go back a little bit, but not all the way. And then I get farther and farther and farther, and I get to the failure point, and I can see it forming a neck here near my fingers, and there it goes. Okay, candy tensile test number 3. This is a blue Sour Patch Kid. And it's going to be a little bit more difficult to see maybe because it's smaller. But I'm going to start holding it right here and pull it. And I can see now that it's going into elastic deformation because it would go back to where it was at. And I get it here a little bit. I can feel the yield point now. And if I get it here, it won't go back exactly to where it was. And then, so that puts me in plastic deformation. And I can see a neck forming right there. And I can see that it's probably going to break right there in the middle. I'm in the plastic deformation. And I'm pulling, trying to keep the tension equal on both sides. Trying to keep the tension equal on both sides, and it gets to the failure point, and slowly, oh, it broke over here. It broke over here because that's where I was holding it. So I'm going to grab it right here again and see if I can pull it off at the neck. Sometimes when you're doing this, if you're holding it a little bit too tight, it'll break over here where your thumb is or your finger, and that's okay. It's just a test. Good thing is Sour Patch Kids come with like 5 of them in the package, so I can try it again. All right, tensile testing video candy number 4. This is a starburst. Actually, this is half of a starburst. I tried it with a full starburst, and I just couldn't keep a hold of it well enough to test it. It just had too much candy in there, and I couldn't pull it apart. I wasn't strong enough. So I'll try it with half a starburst. I just cut it in half. So I'm going to hold it here again and try to pull it with equal strength on both sides. Now the problem with starburst is it tends to squish as you're pulling it, so you might have to grab it a couple extra times here and pull it, and then it gets into, the good thing about starburst is it gets into plastic deformation really quick, because it definitely won't go back to where it was. So if you pull it a little bit, and I'll show you on this one, if you pull it just a little bit, it's elastic deformation, but if you pull it with any distance at all, it's already past its yield point and into plastic deformation because of the material that it is. It goes quickly into plastic deformation. So let's see if I can get one of these to the breaking point here, to the failure point. I'm just going to squish it down a little bit so I can hold on to it better. And I'm pulling it, and you can see that it's forming a neck really fast. And I'm pulling it out. Let's try this one here again. It's really hard to pull apart. So here we go. I'm pulling it apart, and you can see that it's forming a neck. It's forming a neck here and here. But I think that's mostly because that's where I'm squeezing it. It's pulling, and you can see again that it forms a neck right here. And then I pull it apart. That's its failure point, and it breaks.